Hi, everybody. Here we are in the Princess State of Mind interactive lecture series. Today's topic is The Phantom of the Opera. I know some of you are already here. I have to mute myself over here on this. Hold on a second. Mute. Okay, perfect. Um, so I know some of you are already here in the chat, which is excellent. Excellent. I've seen you. And we are going to get started. A couple of things before we do start, and just to let you know what you guys are able to do and not able to do and what's going to happen. And then we'll get started. So I'm Faith Moore. I run a blog at faithkmoore.com. I'm also the author of Saving Cinderella, What Feminists Get Wrong About Disney Princesses and How to Set It Right. But you may notice that we're talking about Phantom of the Opera today, which is neither about a princess nor is it a Disney movie. So what are we doing? Well, we finished our series of classes about Saving Cinderella and they were super fun. And I just wanted to continue doing some kind of online class. So I am branching out into other stories and things that I just love so much. And The Phantom of the Opera is one of my very, very favorite stories and musicals. And I promise you, I know almost as much about The Phantom of the Opera and have thought almost as much about The Phantom of the Opera as I have about Disney princesses. I have probably seen this show live maybe over 30 times, probably like 50 times. I've seen it a lot of times. So trust me, we're going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be great. So here's the deal for you guys. You're able to interact with each other and with me by typing into the YouTube chat on the side of the video that's playing now. So I can see you guys. I see that a bunch of you are already there. I see you typing. Fantastic. I am going to be talking this whole hour because it's only me on the screen. So if you want to ask a question specifically to me rather than just comment or talk to each other, you can do that and I will respond. But you have to indicate that you're talking to me by typing question in capital letters and then your question. So that as I'm just kind of looking over there from time to time, I can see like, oh, someone's actually trying to talk to me, as opposed to you guys are just talking to each other, because otherwise this would just be a video of me reading all of your fantastic comments, which would be very interesting for me, but probably not so interesting for you. So again, as I'm talking, if you want to have something, if you want me to address something, so even if it's not a question, even if it's like, oh, I thought this, but you're saying that or whatever, and you want me to actually address that now live, you should type the word question in capital letters and then your question or comment. And I will sort of periodically be looking over and see those, and I will try to incorporate them. I also had some of you email me beforehand with questions and comments, and those are already incorporated into my notes for what I'm going to say right now. So that's the deal with that. And I'm glad to see that some of you guys are already here and I'm not talking to no one at all. Yay, yay me. So here we go, let's get started. So I wanna say, first of all, that we're gonna focus on Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical of The Phantom of the Opera and not the book, because they're two very different things. But I would for just a minute like to tell you that the book, which I actually have here, so The Phantom of the Opera, it's by Gaston Leroux, is an amazingly entertaining novel. I have read it twice now, and it has it's old. I think it was written in the 1800s. It has no business being this entertaining, but it really is. But basically it's a totally different story than the musical, in the sense that the themes are really different. The book is more of like a mystery story almost. It's a kind of like whodunit or what happened, what's going on. It begins with Christine Daae and Raoul, the Vicomte de Chagny, have disappeared. What happened? And then it kind of goes into that, and there's the opera ghost and everything, and a lot of the same events take place, but the themes are really different. So I do highly recommend the book, but I'm not really going to talk about the book so much, except maybe in passing a couple of times. So that's that. So I do recommend that you read it, and if you do, please tell me what you think about it, because I really love it, but not as much as the musical. So let's just have a quick review of the plot of Phantom of the Opera, the musical, in case anybody forgot So basically, Christine Daae is a chorus girl in the Paris Opera House who begins receiving voice lessons from a mysterious tutor. The tutor turns out to be the Phantom of the Opera, who is a deformed musical genius who lives across the lake under the Paris Opera House. He tries to seduce her with music, into coming to live with him and being his wife and everything and underground. But he's a little creepy. And Christine is also being courted much more normally by a guy named Raoul, who is the Vicomte de Chagny, which is like aristocracy in France. And he's also the patron of the opera house. So they come into contact a lot, and they knew each other as children, we find out. Also, the Phantom of the Opera sort of ends up going off the deep end and killing people and kidnapping Christine and trying to force her to choose between living with him forever or killing Raoul. But then Christine kisses the Phantom, which causes him to release her, and she leaves with Raoul, and the Phantom disappears forever at the end. Obviously, there's a lot more to the story than that. There's all kinds of other characters, but mostly we're really going to be talking about Christine, the Phantom, and Raoul today. So that is kind of like what you need to know if you forgot to understand what I'm going to say. So I actually believe that this whole story is sort of a meditation on romantic love. So like what's healthy, what isn't, what do we need in order to be fulfilled in our romantic love lives, and what's going too far. And I think all these questions and ideas are sort of wrapped up in this love triangle between Christine, the Phantom, and Raoul. And I think that there's an important lesson to draw from it that may not be the one that we expect, given that the story turns out. So I'm getting a question from Winter Naomi Vera. It says, interesting tie between Disney's The Phantom of the Opera, Minnie Driver, who plays Carlotta and sings the final song, Learn to be Lonely, and the voice of Jane in Tarzan. That's true. There's probably a lot of Disney connections between people who've played characters in Broadway musicals and also Disney. So people who've been in Disney movies and also people who've been in Broadway musicals, because there's a huge overlap there. I really liked Minnie Driver. I should say also, I'm not a huge fan of the, I think it's Emmy Rossum, Gerard Butler version of The Phantom of the Opera. I think that it gets the sort of character of the Phantom wrong in a lot of ways. So I don't necessarily recommend that. And actually, I was going to mention this later, but I'll mention it now. The movie version that I recommend the most about The Phantom of the Opera is actually a filmed stage version. It's this one, the 25th anniversary Royal Albert Hall version, which you can get on DVD. I think it's also available on YouTube, at least parts of it are. It stars Sierra Boggess, who I think plays Christine to perfection. I've never seen anyone play Christine as if she was a real person, and Sierra Boggess really does. So this is my favorite movie version, even though it's really a stage version of The Phantom of the Opera. And I lost my train of thought. Oh, and it's got some really interesting stuff there, particularly at the end. And it also has Ramin Karimloo as the Phantom, who I really like as a Broadway actor. His portrayal of the Phantom is really different, and I give him a lot of credit for trying something new. It doesn't work for me entirely, but it's worth watching. So check that one out. Okay, the musical presents us with two men, Raoul and the Phantom. Right? So, and Christine basically has to choose between these two people. That's kind of the conceit of the story, right? She has to pick Raoul or the Phantom, and both of them are trying to get her to pick them. So I will now confess that that my husband is always horrified when I assert that I secretly, or maybe not so secretly now I'm telling you, feel that Christine should have ended up with the Phantom instead of Raoul. Obviously, in real life, that would be a really bad decision, since the Phantom is a murderer and kind of psychotic and everything. But there's actually a reason why I and also a lot of other people are drawn to the Phantom instead of Raoul, and that's part of what I'm going to talk about now. Like, what is it about the Phantom that's appealing? Because on the surface, he is a scary, crazy, guy who turns into a murderer and lives underground and kidnaps Christine and all of these things. So what's to like? But I'm Team Phantom. So uh, the thing is that neither Raoul nor the Phantom is really a good match for Christine. And that is because I think it's because that they each represent a facet of love, but not the full picture. Raoul essentially represents a sort of chaste love. It's not chaste exactly, because if they got married, I assume that they would consummate their marriage, but a sort of love without any sign at all of sort of like base urges. And so maybe a better term is a sort of virtuous love. He stands for sort of justice and loyalty and protection, and he's good to a fault, which is all good, except that he's really boring, like really, really boring, right? He's just kind of that guy that's like always gonna do exactly what you thought he was gonna do, and you know, he's sort of like, he's just exactly what he looks like. There's no passion, there's no kind of drive, there's nothing underneath him. He's just sort of steady and dependable and boring. And the Phantom, on the other hand, represents passion, and even sort of sexual passion, right? Everything he does is kind of all in, and he wants Christine to experience life through music, which is this sort of like passionate art, right? So he wants music to be for Christine something, he says, see it, feel it, secretly, have it secretly possess you, right? The way he relates to Christine is very obviously sexual, right? He's always, when he sings Music of the Night, he's kind of like rubbing his hands all over her, and she experiences his music in a kind of physical way, right? She says, but his voice filled my spirit with a strange, sweet sound. In the night, there was music in my mind, and through music, my soul began to soar, and I heard as I've never heard before, right? Like, yeah, okay, Christine, right? Whew, calm down. So for the Phantom is this kind of like passionate, he's sort of like unbridled passion, as compared to Raoul's kind of like virtuous, chaste, just sort of love, good love for Christine, right? So there's these sort of two sides. But a healthy romantic relationship needs both of these things, right? It needs commitment, loyalty, and love, but it also needs passion. Without love, right, without the sort of Raoul version of love, sex becomes just sex, right? It's just sort of like cheap and meaningless. But without passion, a romantic relationship isn't, it's not full and complete, right? So both of these things are, both of these things are important. I'm getting a question that says, past the point of no return is very sexual, and I totally agree, and I'm going to get to that, I promise. I'm not going to talk about it right now, but I will get to it in the class, because yeah, absolutely, the point of no return is sexual, and there's a reason for that. So you need both the sort of Raoul version and the kind of the version that Raoul represents. So we're saying that basically, almost in a kind of fairy tale shorthand way, Raoul sort of represents the kind of like virtuous love, commitment, all of that. And then in a shorthand, symbolic sense, the Phantom represents kind of passion, and drive, and sort of base urges and sex, right? So, but in this story, Christine has to choose. She doesn't get to have both, the way that we want her to, or the way that we wish we could, right? She has to pick Raoul or the Phantom, and so she goes for Raoul, which is the right choice, right? Because he's not a crazy murdering psychopath. But it's not necessarily a good choice. It's not necessarily the choice that will fulfill her and make her happy, and neither would the Phantom be, obviously, also. But she has to pick, and she picks Raoul. And there wasn't really a good choice for her, because the Phantom has taken his passion to the extreme, right? So the problem with the Phantom, if we're going to just say one, no, the problem with the Phantom is that because he's been mistreated, throughout his life because of his deformity, right? He sees no reason to keep his passions in check, right? Like people have mistreated him. He's not really a part of the world anymore. He hasn't been taught how to control himself. And so when he's inspired, he just writes music and, doesn't eat or sleep. When he's angry, he kills people. When he wants something or someone, he takes it, right? He hasn't found any reason to temper any of his urges, right? So I- I'm not making excuses for the Phantom, right? He could have and should have chosen not to do this, but it is the way that he is, right? So backstory for the Phantom, right? We're told by Madame Giry, who's the leader of the troupe of dancers that Christine is in when we first meet her. She says that she saw him in a cage at a freak show. So obviously he's been mistreated in some way. And then the novel actually goes into a lot more detail about what has happened to him and his life, and it's a bad deal, right? Bad life. But I also, and speaking of his backstory, I also just want to recommend another book. It's just called Phantom. It's by Susan Kay. This is basically a novel that kind of merges the musical and the original novel by Gaston Leroux into a sort of backstory for the Phantom. So it tells this story. The Phantom is the protagonist, and it tells the story from his life, his birth, essentially, until his death. And I actually found it because I was watching an interview a long time ago with one of the actors that has played the Phantom. I can't remember what his name is now, but at the time, he was the person who'd played the Phantom on Broadway for the longest consecutive shows. He was saying that even though this book is not part of the musical, or, it wasn't sort of like, what's that called? Sponsored by the musical or anything. He said that he read this book really closely to sort of inform his character. And it is a great book. I may be slightly overselling it in the sense that when I read it, I was pregnant and throwing up, and that's all I could do was read this book. And so I was very, very grateful to have it. But still, I really recommend it for people who love Phantom of the Opera. It's just called Phantom. It's by Susan Kay. It might be out of print, but I think you can get it. I got it online, so I think you can get it online. And this also sort of goes into more of his backstory, which it gets from the book and the musical. So basically, I mean, he is someone who's been horribly mistreated, right? Because he has this facial deformity, which makes him unable to live in society because everybody sort of shies away from him. So in that sense, we can understand why he isn't really able to exist in society. But it also isn't an excuse for him, right? To have let his passions run amok, right? But there it is, right? He is someone who doesn't see any reason or hasn't been taught or whatever to control himself. And so he's a very passionate person, and all of his passion has kind of overtaken him, and he just does what he wants, including killing people, kidnapping them, frightening people. I mean, at the beginning, he's just sort of dropping the flies, which are the kind of backdrops, the things that hold the backdrops for the show, right? He's just sort of dropping them just to frighten people, right? And then as the story goes along and Christine sort of is leaning towards Raoul instead of him, it just sort of spirals out of control because his passion for Christine is so intense. He then takes it all out on all these other people who have nothing to do with anything except that they help him to try to get what he wants, right? So, and the thing is that once the Phantom has killed people, there's really no going back for him, right? Christine can't choose him after that. And he does kill people. He kills Bouquet, who's the chief of the flies. He's the guy who's in charge of lifting up all of those things. And the Phantom hangs him and drops him down in the middle of a performance. And he also kills Piangi, who is the lead singer in the opera, in order to take his place for the point of no return, which again, we'll talk about later. So he is a murderer. and therefore can't really be redeemed in terms of the story. But before that, I mean, we don't really have an indication in this that he's killed anyone before that, and we feel like he's killing because his passion is sort of ramping up and getting out of control, even more out of control because of what's happening with Christine. So I think before he kills, he has a chance at redemption. But afterwards, he really doesn't. And that's kind of part of the tragedy of the story, is that he goes that far down the road before he kind of understands the error of his ways. And then we're sort of stuck in terms of what Christine can do. But initially, at least, the Phantom has no real reason to change. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute, about why he doesn't. And the time when he sort of comes to feel like he might want to change is at the very end. And by then it's too late because he's done so many horrible things, right? So the other thing to note about the Phantom is that until the very end, he really doesn't talk about love. He talks about music. And though it's clear from the way he sings about it that music is like a physical passion for him, like kind of like sex or like lust, right? So music kind of stands in for that passion in the story. So in terms of symbolism, right, in the story, music for the Phantom is kind of it's kind of that physical passion, which a lot of times for him and for people translates into kind of lust or like sexual feelings, right? So he talks a lot about music, and when he ends up killing Piangi at the end and taking his place on stage, the song that they're singing, so now I'm going to get to this question, is The Point of No Return. And The Point of No Return is a song about sex. It's the whole song is about when two people who are now being played by Christine and the Phantom in the opera, which the Phantom has written, right? So this is his magnum opus, Don Juan Triumphant, and he's written this, and now he is playing opposite Christine this song. They're trying to figure out when they're going to sleep together, right? And so they sing, "I've already imagined our bodies entwining, defenseless and silent, and now I am here with you. No second thoughts, I've decided." And then one final question: how long should we wait? How long should we two wait before we're one? So it's obviously about they're trying to figure out when they should sleep together and what that's going to be like. And the Phantom is someone who's actually never had sex because he is too ugly for anyone to have ever wanted to do that with him. And so, until the very end, he is someone who mistakes lust for love, right? He thinks that if he consummates his relationship with Christine, that will sort of be the ultimate act, that their love will sort of be the ultimate act of their love. But without love, sex is just sex, right? I mean, and not to go too far off on a tangent, but this is kind of something that our culture is kind of confused about today, right? This idea that lust is somehow paramount, and that we should indulge in all our sexual urges all the time. And that's where you get sort of hookup culture and all of this stuff, and people confusing sex with intimacy and all of this stuff. So the Phantom, because he sort of burns with passion, and lust is one of these things that we feel, these passions that we feel, he actually thinks at first that his lust for Christine is also love, the pure version of love that Raoul represents. He thinks that those are the same, not that we need both, but rather that they are equal. And so this drive, this music represents that for him. That's what he's all about in the beginning. So hang on, I'm getting another question. So I believe his homicidal tendencies are from being hated and abused and turning it against those who hate him or who he hates. Still no excuse and dangerous unless they let go of it. Right. So yeah, I mean, I think that the reason that he doesn't see the need to control himself is because he hasn't had any reason to do that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But I think, yeah, I mean, I think he's angry from being treated that way, as anybody would. But I think a person who had more control over himself or felt the need to have more control over himself would not kill people. I mean, lots of us get really, really angry, and lots of people are mistreated, and a lot of people don't kill other people. So I think there's that piece that's there, right? He's angry at the world. But then there's an additional piece of, he doesn't think that it's necessary to control himself. And that's why he actually ends up killing, right? So the Phantom says that he burns in hell, but secretly yearns for heaven, right? Which, I mean, right? It gets you right here, because so many of us feel, I think, that we are not what we are meant to be, right? We're not who we're meant to be. We're not, if we're believers like I am, if God meant us to be a certain way and we just keep failing, right? So he burns in hell but secretly yearns for heaven. And I think that's actually really relatable, even though we're not all deformed mad geniuses living under opera houses. But he actually doesn't understand what heaven is. Some of you have probably heard me talk about Disney's Cinderella, and if you haven't, read my book. But that movie makes a really clear comparison between romantic love and divine love. That's kind of heaven on earth. But that kind of love is full and true, right? It's passionate and virtuous. But the Phantom doesn't understand that kind of love. And he can't love Christine truly and continue to let his passions run amok, right? So he can't be her true love, in a sense, right? If he's going to keep being the way that he has been being. So he's all passion, right? And he has let his passion run unchecked. And in letting it run unchecked, it has led him to true evil. And this brings us, of course, to another story that is very close to my heart and that bears a lot of similarities to the Phantom of the Opera, particularly when it comes to all of this. And so I think you know what I'm going to say, but this notion of a man who has let his base instincts run amok appears, of course, in Beauty and the Beast, right? So the symbolism in Beauty and the Beast is that a man has allowed his base male urges to run unchecked, and so he's turned into a beast because that's the way he's acting, like a beast, right? The Phantom also has a beastly exterior. Okay, so Christine says that his face is so distorted, deformed, it was hardly a face. And, in the novel, so the musical, the Phantom of the Opera in the musical has the half mask, right? Like this, or like this. I just had to show you my cup and drink some water. So the reason that he has that half mask is just so that the actor can sing, right? Because if his whole face was covered with a mask, it would be really hard to hear him. So the people who created the musical devised this mask, and I actually think it's kind of amazing that it was sort of an accident or a coincidence, because I think that it really symbolizes something important about the Phantom, which is that he is, underneath all of that, is a man, right? So when he wears the mask, he looks like a man because it's just covering half his face. And when he takes it off, he's this kind of deformed, he calls himself, I think, a gargoyle. He's this sort of deformed person. And in the novel, and also in that book I was referencing, Phantom by Susan Kay, his whole face is deformed. He doesn't look, his whole face is deformed. He has no nose at all. And, I think his eyes are described as sort of sunken back in his head and that they're yellow. And he looks like a skeleton, essentially, a skeleton face. So he, I think, so he has this kind of beastly exterior, which is off-putting to people who see him. But this, I will say, this isn't a fairy tale, right? So it isn't told completely through symbolism, even though there's a lot of symbolism going on here. So the Phantom has always been ugly, and it is his ugliness that has caused him to have to live outside the world and not know how to curb his passions and all of the things that we were just talking about. But I think in terms of the sort of thematic elements of the musical and the story, the concept is the same. And we're definitely supposed to make a comparison between Beauty and the Beast and the Phantom of the Opera because it's actually there in the musical. The Phantom says, "You'll learn to see, to find the man behind the monster, this repulsive carcass who seems a beast, but secretly dreams of beauty." Right? So it's actually there in the show. So I'm not just sort of reaching for things because I love both stories. We're meant to make this comparison. And I also talk a lot more about this, by the way, on my blog. I have a piece, I think it's called "Look at Your Face in the Mirror," on my blog at faithkmore.com, which you can read, in which I really sort of talk about the similarities and differences between Beauty and the Beast and Phantom of the Opera. But I'm just going to talk about it a little bit here. So, like the Beast, the Phantom believes that his deformity is the only thing standing between him and Christine. He thinks that if he looked normal, then she would love him. But really, it's his behavior, right? Because by the end, Christine is saying, "This haunted face holds no horror for me now. It's in your soul that the true distortion lies," right? And that is true, right? The fact that the Phantom looks the way he looks doesn't really have anything to do with anything, except that it's what led him to be the way he is. But if he wasn't that way, the fact that he looked this way wouldn't necessarily deter Christine when she got to know him. But it's actually his internal self that is distorted, and that's the thing that is a sort of impediment to his love with Christine. So I'm just going to say here that the song "Music of the Night," which is sort of one of the main memorable songs from the show, could be viewed as a song that's like, "Come over to the dark side," right? Like, "Come live with me in my dark lair where we kill people and write strange music and never see the light of day again," right? That it could be that he's trying to seduce her into his way of life, his sort of debauched and depraved life. But there's actually a lot of darkness imagery there, as opposed to like, "Come into the dark." There's a lot of, there's night, close your eyes, your darker side, etc. And so I think more than that, more than like, "Come be dark with me," I think that the Phantom is trying to get Christine to see him as something other than his outer appearance. So if she closes her eyes, or if it was night, and so she couldn't see, then she would only be experiencing him as his inner self, right? Because she wouldn't be able to see his ugliness. So, and that would be, his passion and his music and his kind of base love, right? But and that's true, right? Like, if she could see past the outer exterior, she would be able to figure out who he is as a person, right? But as a person, he's acting like a total lunatic, right? Because his passion is all consuming and totally unchecked. Like the Beast at the beginning of that movie. And so, like the Beast, it isn't actually his beastly exterior that's the impediment to his love, it's his actions. Okay, so when I think about the Phantom, I think of a sort of Beast character initially, and then their stories sort of diverge because of what happens to them. But at the beginning, they're both men who have let their base urges run amok. Their urges are slightly different, right? The Beast is more sort of like masculine baseness, base masculine urges, and the Phantom is that, but there's a sort of level of like passion and talent and drive in there too. But they are people who have these urges because all people have urges, right? I mean, that's the thing. All people have urges. And the question is, are you going to channel them into something? Or are you going to let them run free? And both of them have let them run free, and they are then cursed because of that, right? The Phantom's curse is a much more realistic curse in that, people, see him and they judge him that way, and et cetera. And the Beast is more symbolic. It's an actual curse. But there they are, right? They begin the story having their inner selves represented on their outer selves. And then their journey is to see if they can change their inner self, and that would change their outer self. For the beast, that's literal, right? It would change his outer self because this is a fairy tale and it's symbolic. For the phantom, what that would look like is that people would see him as a person as opposed to as this sort of abomination, right? So now we come to Christine, right? Because Christine ought to be the Belle person in this scenario. And the Phantom's love for Christine ought to transform him from a beast into a man, at least internally. But it doesn't, right? It just makes him become more and more depraved as he tries to win her love, as opposed to the beast, who becomes more and more a gentleman as he tries to win her love. Now I will drink from my Phantom cup and you can observe. Ta-da! Okay, so why? Why does this happen? Why does the Phantom's love, why does his love for Christine not save him? And I think that this has to do with who Christine is as a character versus who Belle is as a character. So the point of Belle's character in Beauty and the Beast is that Belle is always completely and utterly herself, right? She tells the beast where to go when he's acting like a jerk. She doesn't change her behavior for him in any way. And when the beast sees this and he sees who she is and that she has so much integrity and is this wonderful person, he loves her for it. And he realizes that he's got to get his act together if he's going to get her to love him too, right? And so all of the beast's change is on the beast's part, right? Belle isn't trying to change him. She's just being herself. And he has this realization like, oh, like she is this amazing, wonderful person who isn't afraid of me and isn't, and is telling me telling things like it is and all of this stuff. And I have to become worthy of her love. Otherwise I'm never gonna even have a chance because I look like this, right? And Belle doesn't really know what's going on with the beast and that he is changing until he has actually changed. And suddenly she's like, oh, he's a great guy. What happened? I thought he was a scary beast. It turns out, and it's new and a bit alarming, right? She didn't know that was going on. Christine, on the other hand, is timid. She's afraid. She's unsure. She's confused, right? She's not any of those things that I was just saying that Belle is. 1 minute she's totally giving in to the Phantom's seduction and is like interested in the whole thing, like think Music of the Night, right? And the next minute she's totally freaking out and telling Raoul that she never wants to see the Phantom again, right? She's like terrified of him, and she doesn't want anything to do with him, and that's kind of all I ask of you on the rooftop, right? So she is initially horrified by his deformity, by the way that he looks, and judges him initially because of it. And it's interesting to note that like Belle never actually judges the beast by his exterior, always his interior. I mean, she sees him. Belle sees the beast and she sees that he's a beast, but it's his behavior toward her, that he's sort of locking her up and that he didn't let her say goodbye to her father and all this stuff that she immediately kind of latches onto as her reason for thinking that she doesn't like him. Whereas Christine is like horrified when she pulls the mask off because she wants to know who this guy is and what's going on. So she pulls his mask off and then it's like, ugh. And in fact, she gives it back, right? She's like, put that back on, right? As opposed to like, oh, okay, so you're this guy and what are you acting like? Right, which is kind of what Belle would be like. So initially, she kind of holds the Phantom on this pedestal as the angel of music, right? And she thinks that he's a supernatural being. A lot of people in the opera house think that, but she thinks he's the angel of music because her father, who was a famous violinist and is now dead, said that when he died, he would send her the angel of music to comfort her and be with her. And so then the Phantom starts, singing to her and teaching her to sing, in her dressing room where she can't see him, but she can hear him. And she thinks, oh, he's the angel of music. And the Phantom sort of plays up on this because it's how he's getting her to to kind of trust him and want to come with him. But she can't really be strong internally if this is how she views him, right? Because she can't sort of tell him where to go if she thinks he's like a god essentially, or sent from God, an angel, right? So uh, she isn't able to reject the phantom's unchecked behavior, right? So she sort of succumbs to it and then sort of is scared of it, but she never sort of says like, cut it out, dude. Like Belle does, right? And so because she can't do that, the phantom kind of goes further and further down his path of destruction and degradation, because he doesn't see anything, any reason to change, right? And Christine's ultimate gift to the phantom, which is showing him that he's, you know, not alone by kissing him when his mask is off, it isn't really the same as Belle's gift to the beast, which is being someone worth changing for. Um, and you know, I'll talk more about that kiss in a second, but you know, it's more sort of an act, like an individual act, as opposed to just being strong, internally strong. And none of this is to say that the things that the Phantom does are Christine's fault. You know, it's not because she didn't do something that he is a murderer. That's not what I mean. They're not her fault. The only point, it's only to point out that this musical is showing us what could have happened to the beast if he'd fallen in love with someone like Christine instead of someone like Belle, or if he hadn't fallen in love at all, right? This character, this sort of trope of the man whose urges have run unchecked, needs some reason to check them, and often it is in love of a good woman. And I'm not going to talk here all about why the Beauty and the Beast idea isn't about like, oh, you can totally change a jerk into a great guy. It's not about that. You can check my YouTube channel for my video all about Beauty and the Beast, which explains that in further detail. But it's not that, right? The man has to find some reason, and it could be something else. It could be like his job or his, you know, loyalty to his sick mom or something, but most of the time in real life, love is the sort of motivating factor. And so, you know, the person that he falls in love with could actually just totally not even know he exists, right? It's that he sees like, oh, in order to be you know, in order to have a chance, I have to be somebody different. I can't be this sort of crazy wild person. I have to channel my urges into like protection and loyalty and all of these things that are such important and wonderful good parts of masculinity, right? So it's not Christine's fault. It's just that the Phantom doesn't have that trope, right, to work towards or to change for. So when Christine does eventually kiss him, it's an act of charity, not love, right? She's giving him something that he's never had, which is a loving human touch. And in that act, she saves him. But she can't save their love because of how far it's gone down the wrong path. All that the Phantom can do now is leave the world, because he sees that he's been completely wrong. He does come to see the difference between lust and love, and the difference between passion and romance, and he sees that he's been wrong, that this way that he's been of sort of pursuing every little urge has been wrong, and that you can't have love without passion or passion without love in the real world. He sees that because when he experiences Christine's kiss, when he experiences this sort of chaster version of love or this kind of human connection, a door opens. Like there's a completely other way of being that is beautiful and good that he didn't even know was out there. And he sees that a person who has done what he's done and behaved how he's behaved can't walk through that door. And he sees what a sort of huge error he has made when he receives that kiss. That's why it's such a beautiful and tragic moment. And so, you know, at the end, he disappears, right? It's this sort of amazing thing where he sits down in the chair and he covers himself up. And then a second later, Meg Giry comes and takes the cloth away and he's actually gone, which is really cool to watch in real life. But what's left is his mask, right? It's left on the chair, and Meg comes and holds it up, and it's this sort of iconic moment at the end of the show. But he leaves his mask behind for a reason. The mask was what he was using to try to seem to Christine like a normal person while continuing to be depraved on the inside, right? So like the beast has nowhere to hide. He just looks like a beast. And so the only way to try to get anyone to see him as anything other than a beast is to act like something that's not a beast. But the Phantom can cover his face, and he covers his face, and then it's like, see, I'm normal, and he gets to keep acting like a beast, right? So he leaves his mask behind, because he had thought that if he looked normal, it would be enough. But when Christine kisses him, and he feels that force of true, good, real human connection and realizes he's been wrong, he leaves the mask behind because he sees now that it's useless, right? It's who he is on the inside, not what he looks like, that matters. So he might as well look the way that he has behaved, right? And so we know that he's somewhere. We don't know where he goes. We don't know what happens to him, but he's wherever he is. He doesn't have his mask on, right? We don't know what it is that drew the Phantom to Christine in the first place, as opposed to some other chorus girl or someone else from the opera house. But we do know that he tells her, "You alone can make my song take flight." And so I think actually that he sees her as a sort of weak, malleable person, suffering from the loss of her father and in need of a mentor. And as such, she's someone who might accept him the way he is, the way he looks, if he convinces her that, he's the angel of music. And, so she's in awe of him. And it's that very weakness that causes him to fall for her. And that she has a beautiful singing voice. So, I think he does care for her. I mean, I think initially he feels lust for her, but, he comes to love her. But I think that sort of initial drive is the exact problem, right? She's the kind of person who isn't going to stand up to him and say, "Whoa, dude, you're acting really weird." She's going to sort of be enthralled to this. She's such an ingenue. They call her an ingenue in the show. Like, she enthralled to this man, this angel of music, right? So I think, it's his undoing, but it's also, it's of his own making because he chose her for that reason. All right, I have another question. How does masquerade and hide your face so the world will never find you fit into this? Ooh, good question. I'm going to get there. Hang on. I'm getting there, I promise. When Christine is still under his thrall, and she goes to his lair and she's actually kind of into it, they sing together, "Your spirit and my voice," as in the Phantom spirit and Christine's voice, in one combined. So the Phantom kind of wants to use Christine in order to be a normal person. He wants her to be the acceptable face for his passion and his music. But his spirit is corrupted, right? And it needs more than a pretty face to bring it out into the moral world, right? Again, he thinks that if his physical self changes, that will be enough. But no, it's his internal self that needs to change. And at the very end, when Christine comes back to give his wedding ring back to him, right? So he had kidnapped her and taken her down, and in the sequence, it's called Final Lair. If you listen to the score, it's just called Final Lair, where he takes her down to his lair and he's trying to force her to marry him, and he dresses her in a wedding dress, and it's kind of creepy, and puts a ring on her finger. But then when he lets her go, she goes, and then she comes back. She's going to leave with Raoul, but she wants to give him his ring back. And suddenly he tells her, "Christine, I love you." Love, right? He never said that really to her before. And in fact, he hardly ever mentions love. And I think the only other time he does is when he tells her, when she sees him for the first time with his mask off, he says, "Fear can turn to love," which is actually really creepy. You can feel afraid at first, and then come to love them later, like Belle does for the beast. But fear doesn't really turn into love. So the Phantom didn't understand love then, only passion. But now he gets it, except it's too late. And in that moment, when he says that he loves her, she's drawn to him again. because suddenly he really is both. He really is that perfect combination, love and passion. But he's already gone too far before he realized all of this, right? He's killed people, and so she can't. You can't sort of come back from that really within the context of this story, and so she has to go with Raoul. And then the Phantom says, "It's over now, the music of the night." Right? The thing is, the Phantom's passion was beautiful, right? Before it became degraded, right? It was all heart and feeling and sex and power and burning desire, and those are all appealing. But he hadn't tempered his passion with love, and so it has to end. And so, that's kind of the tragedy of the story, is that he does figure it out. He does realize what he was doing wrong, but for him it's too late, and so he can't be that person. And actually, this movie version I was talking about has a really cool moment at the end, which isn't really in the musical if you watch it on Broadway. And it's like so tiny, you have to be as obsessed with this musical as I am to notice it. But when he says he loves her, and then he starts singing "All I Ask of You" to her, which is the song she sings with Raoul. And there's a moment where she turns around, like maybe she'll go to him, because now he is that person. He's both. And then Raoul sort of shows up and says, come on. And she goes with Raoul, but because, she really can't be with the Phantom, but she needs somebody else. Right. So, what is with Raoul, right? So now we get to Raoul. It all begs the question, right? Is Raoul the right person for Christine? Because she ends up with him, but she is also still drawn to the Phantom, especially now that he has come to this realization. So Raoul, when he is proposing to her, etc., says, no more talk of darkness, right? And so the dark, which was the Phantom's refuge, because in the dark he can be a man and not a monster, is not for Raoul, right? Raoul exists only in the light. But there's something about the dark that is appealing to Christine and to all of us. And I don't mean the dark like evil, right? I mean what it represents here, which is this sort of passion, and kind of just sort of this overwhelming sort of like intensity that the Phantom represents. And that's appealing to us, right? Especially if you can be like the Beast ends up being, and have it be within you, but channel it, right? That's really appealing. So Raoul is sort of all light, and that means that he has no passion. Love me, that's all I ask of you, right? That's all Raoul can do. And it's good. Love is good. Love is beautiful and wonderful, but without passion and even without physical desire in an adult romantic relationship, something is missing. And when Raoul enters the Phantom's lair at the end, which is the place where passion reigns, he is immediately immobilized, right? Like for all of the talk about keep your hand at the level of your eyes so that the Phantom can't put his the Punjab lasso, like he can't put his noose around his neck. That's immediately what happens to him. He gets the noose around his neck, right? Because he was trying to do the right thing, save Christine, but he comes up against the Phantom's passion, and he's powerless, right? So Raoul can provide protection for Christine and safety and a sort of chaste sort of love. And if the choice is between that and the Phantom's unbridled passion, she's got to choose Raoul. But it's kind of the tragedy of this story that she needs both. We all need both. And in teaching the Phantom that what love is at the very end, Christine comes like this close to having both. If she'd only been able to do that earlier, before Phantom went totally crazy and killed people, she might have found true happiness, and the Phantom might have found redemption. But as it is, she's sort of left with the next best thing, which really isn't all that great, in my opinion. And that's kind of why we're sad at the end. I said my husband's horrified at my allegiance to the Phantom, but it's not really the Phantom as he is that I love. It's who he could have been if he had been, like the Beast, right? So, we're coming to the end here, and I haven't forgotten to get to Masquerade. I will. Um, so like Beauty and the Beast, this story is all about inner and outer beauty, right? But it doesn't exist within the confines of a fairy tale, so it does hit us over the head with some literal truths, but within a symbolic narrative. And so in Masquerade, the cast sings, "Hide your face so the world will never find you." And at the end, the Phantom echoes that, right? After Christine has gone off with Raoul the first time, and he's realized to the error of his ways, he's got the little monkey, creepy monkey thing, that plays the melody of that song, and he sings, "Hide your face so the world will never find you." Um, but Belle told the Beast, "Come into the light," and the Beast did come into the light. But the Phantom chose to hide his face, and couldn't be seen, right? So the idea is, it isn't the outside that matters, it's the inside, even for the Phantom, who has been truly mistreated because of the way he looks on the outside. But he had a chance at redemption with Christine, who eventually felt like, his tortured face held no horror for her. The Phantom believes that no one could love him if they know what he looks like, which the Beast thinks too. But instead of doing everything he can to help Christine see past all that, right, like the Beast is supposed to do, he tries to distract her with his music, and his passion. But so the whole idea of that masquerade sequence, and how it comes back for the Phantom, it is about this idea of who we are, whether we're going to show it to the world or not, whether we're going to hide it. And the Phantom has made this kind of fatal error, which is that he thinks that it's just the outside that matters, right? That if he could get rid of his ugly outside, then he could just be his ugly inside and it would be fine. But it isn't fine. And at the end, when he says it again, he's sort of reiterating it, like, hide your face so the world will never find you. But he's sort of, even the way he sings it, it's sort of like contemplative, like he's thinking about that, and it's kind of like, oh, like I was doing that all wrong. So I think it's really just sort of this meditation on like what it really means to be a full and complete person. So Christine, like all of us, needs to be loved by someone passionate who is willing to channel his passions and keep them in check, and use them in service of her protection. In Raoul, she gets protection and she gets love, but she misses out on passion. And if the Phantom had reined himself in sooner, and had understand that love is more than lust sooner, he would have been the right choice. But now he can never be. And I think that the story is a tragedy. And I think it also has sort of implications for our life in the real world too, right? And I think it's a tragedy because the Phantom figures it all out too late, and because Christine, while she gets someone who will always love her and who she loves in some way, she doesn't get that sort of that full, complete love experience. And so I think it's actually not a happy ending to the movie. So that's all I got. We're pretty much out of time. I want to say thank you so much for being here and being a part of this, and for asking your questions and your comments. And I can't wait to go back and read all of your comments, which I couldn't do while I was talking. But thank you for being a part of this, and for sharing your thoughts with me, and for being here. I really appreciate it. And I will be back with more lectures and more things, so stay tuned for that. I will keep you all posted. Feel free to go to my website, faithkmoore.com. You can follow me on Twitter at faithkmoore, and you can find me on Facebook at Disney Princess Addict. So thanks so much for being here and for watching. It was a pleasure, and I will see you all and talk to you all soon. Bye.